That doesn't work for me, brother. All those immortal words have defamed Hulk Hogan more than any other words in the English language. Well, except for one other word. The point is, the Hulkster's reputation for backstage politicking is a pretty strong one, but isn't necessarily as deserved as many fans think that it is. Well, that's the topic of this episode, because today... Please support this channel by subscribing, and you could support it even further by signing up over on my Patreon page, just like with Ron Hawthorne and Meiji Stray. Thank you and the rest of the Patrons for all the amazing support as you keep this channel going. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm just going to ask that you please remember to give this video a like after you hear me out, considering that there are probably going to be a lot of people giving this a big thumbs down before even listening to what I have to say. So if you could just please offset them, that would be really appreciated. Now, on with the video. Recently, I talked about what I thought WCW could have done in order to beat the WWF in the Monday Night Wars. And just like with any What If episode, there were plenty of people crying in the comment section who apparently don't understand what a hypothetical is. But out of the several complaints that did reoccur for that episode, and if you'd like me to take those down in another video, please let me know, the one that seemed to pop up the most centered around Hulk Hogan, as a question how cooperative he would have been if the scenario were to happen. And in order to justify their animosity, they used the quote, "That doesn't work for me, brother," a reference to how the Hulkster allegedly shut down many creative ideas. Although the question remains, did Hulk Hogan ever actually say this? And if he did, about what specific incident and how many times? But if he didn't, then how exactly did this spread around as much as it has? Now, to answer whether or not the Hulkster actually said this phrase, the answer is... well, I don't know. I didn't work backstage in WWF or WCW. How should I have any idea? Furthermore, I'm also willing to bet that most of you out there probably didn't work backstage in WWF or WCW either at the time. But you know who did? Kevin Nash. He's the one that said in an interview with Sports Illustrated that the biggest obstacle in leading the creative side of the company were the superstars, such as Hulk Hogan, who had creative control of their characters built into guaranteed contracts. And from there he would claim that Hogan would say the now infamous phrase. To make sure that we're clear on this, I'm not trying to say that Hulk Hogan never said this, as I'm pretty sure he probably did. I just think it's worth noting that this is coming secondhand, possibly even thirdhand if you think about it. Nevertheless, this article is the most concrete form of evidence that I could find indicating that Hulk really did say this. Unless there's another form of hidden camera footage that winds up getting leaked. Now, going back to that previous video and the whole reason why this came up in the first place, it's because I suggested in that episode that Hulk Hogan would defeat Bret Hart in 1998 for the WCW World Championship, and from there he would drop the title to one Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And from here, the complaining about Hulk Hogan's backstage antics ran wild. Now, was any of this actually warranted? After all, they're trying to use a real-world example to justify why this fictional scenario wouldn't work. Well, two can play at that game. Starting with the Bret Hart part of this equation, yes, it has been reported that the Hulkster apparently didn't want to put over Bret Hart back in their WWF days. But does that necessarily mean that the same thing would happen in World Championship Wrestling in 1998? Especially when you remember that the way I had it, Hollywood Hogan would be going over that of the Hitman. Even though according to one commenter, that doesn't matter, Hogan would refuse to work with Bret even if he was going to win. Well, to further put this under the microscope, let's take a look at actual history, because as it turns out, both Hulk Hogan and Bret Hart have wrestled one-on-one a total of 8 different times, 5 of which happened on WCW house shows, and they all ended in a no contest. And as for the remaining 3, the first 2 happened in Georgia Championship Wrestling before Terry Bollea was even Hulk Hogan. And as for the remaining one, well, that match happened in WCW, and it happened in the year 1998, and Bret Hart came out on top. Now granted, he did win by disqualification, but all things being fair and equal, the Hulkster still didn't get the W. And it happened in the exact same year that I booked it in. Although, continuing along those lines, what about the other match that I had booked to happen? What about Hulk Hogan jobbing out to The Rock? How do we know that the Hulkster would go along with that? Well, first off, yet again, we don't. It was a hypothetical video, and it was just me pitching what I think would have won the war for WCW, not something that I thought actually would have happened. It's like if your doctor tells you to eat right and to exercise, if you don't go ahead and go through with it, does that mean your doctor's wrong? Now, despite that, if you still want to go ahead and play the what really happened game, well, let's go ahead and look at history yet again. Because if you recall, back in 2002, Hulk Hogan did end up counting the lights for the Great One. And he did so not once, but twice. But fine, I'm sure some of you out there are saying to yourselves, that was 2002 Hogan, that wasn't Golden Shovel 1998 Hogan, they're two completely different guys. Right? Well, not so fast, because now I think is a good time to bring up his actual win percentages. When you look at his overall career, you'll see that he's not as much of a winning machine as a lot of people think that he is, with him not even scoring over 75% in the very same year that Hulkamania all began. And sure, he does have many years where he has an extremely high win percentage. However, 1998 isn't one of them, as in that year he only had a total of 7 wins, giving him a total win percentage of only 16.3, scoring an amazingly low 76.7% in the L column. And while we're looking at win percentages, let's go ahead and look at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's for that same year, keeping in mind that he did win the WWE World title in 1998. And when we crunch the numbers, we'll see that he scored 37.1%, which is over twice that of Hulk Hogan. But now, when we go on to the Hitman, we'll see that he scored even higher, scoring better than the both of them, even though he was in WCW, where most fans will agree that Bret wasn't used to his best potential. And one of those jobs that happened in that year involved Hogan giving the belt to an up-and-comer who used to play football named Bill Goldberg. And while none of us know for certain whether Hogan would ever put over The Rock in 1998 WCW, again, it's a fictional what-if scenario, nobody knows what really would have happened. The point I'm trying to make is there's enough evidence to suggest that it's not outside of the realm of possibility, and if anything, it might be rather plausible. Now, all in all, what I'm trying to say here is, look, I understand. Hulk Hogan has a lot of reason to hate him, especially if you didn't grow up as a Hulkamaniac. After everything he's done in the industry, for some reason he still feels the need to tell lies, and not even good ones at that. And in addition, his particular style of wrestling is definitely not everyone's cup of tea, and in some people's opinion actually ruined the business. And also, there's the whole incident where he was recorded using a racial slur, with some people even saying that he's worse than Edge, and Edge slept with his friend's girlfriend. Although in that exact same leaked video, Hogan was sleeping with his friend's wife. Anyway, the point of the matter is, yes, Hulk Hogan is guilty of a whole lot of stuff. However, just because he's guilty of those things doesn't mean that he's guilty of all things. And when it comes to backstage wrestling politics, as Eric Bischoff put it, when there was a creative disagreement and he had to choose between Hulk Hogan and another wrestler, he erred on the side of the guy who made the most money in wrestling history at that point in time, which is just sound logic. And if we're really being fair here, if you brought in as much as Hulk Hogan has to the industry, well, I think that does afford you the right to get to throw your weight around a little bit. Or even a lot. Hogan's a big guy. And in the least, he should have more political sway than a Billy Kidman, so to speak. And by the way, Billy Kidman is someone else that Hulk Hogan has job to. And again, I need to stress that I'm not trying to say that Hogan is completely blameless here, as he, in my opinion, should have put Bret Hart over at WrestleMania 9, and he should have lost cleanly to Sting at Starrcade 1997. And don't get me wrong, I understand that Hulk Hogan held down talent like Steve Austin, and I know there's some of you out there that still hold a grudge over TNA, but when it comes to Stone Cold, ultimately that was Bischoff's decision, and the way I look at it, getting fired is what helped create Stone Cold Steve Austin instead of just giving us Stunning Steve. So that's a win in my book. And as for TNA, I know the popular thing to do is to blame Hulk Hogan, but the reality is Dixie Carter is the one to blame for all these decisions. While yes, her family's money did save TNA, we all know she has no business in the business. And I think we should also point out that Impact's highest ratings ever were all due to Hulk Hogan and that initial Monday night special. Meanwhile, their lowest rated episodes have nothing to do with him at all. Plus, Hogan is also the reason they switched over to a square ring. My overall point is that Hogan did do some good for TNA, and that there are plenty of other places to properly attribute blame. So I'm not saying that everything that Hogan did in TNA was good, I just need to stress that it is a multifaceted situation, and I know the internet really doesn't do a good job with handling those kinds of things. But we also shouldn't forget that Hogan did indeed do the favors even at times where I say he shouldn't have, like dropping the strap to Lex Luger in 1997 instead of just saving that for Sting. Or would he put over the Wall? Who remembers The Wall? I mean, seriously. And my biggest concern is that fans throwing this around the internet wrestling community as much as they do has really blinded a lot of people to the real situation here. As I've said on other occasions, if we want better wrestling, we need better wrestling criticism. And using this tired old meme as a blanket statement to dismiss anything you want really doesn't do you any favors. Especially if you're trying to use it to shoot down one of my hypothetical fictional scenarios. Well, there you go, the breakdown of one of the most infamous phrases in all of professional wrestling. Please be sure to give this video a like to offset all the people who just don't want to listen to, facts and evidence and proof. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my awesome Patreon supporters. And as always, Dave knows.